Today is Wednesday, January 18, 2012, and Joe Turner and myself, Judy Meyer, are talking to Bill Smith. And Bill, thanks for letting us come over. And could you just tell us when you were born?
September 26, 1935.
And where were you born?
St. John's Hospital, St. Louis.
Okay. And when you were growing up, when you were young, where did you live?
Basically lived in an unincorporated area right east of Charlotte or Overland on North and South Road.
Okay. When you lived there, where'd you go to school?
Went to Harrison School, which is in the Normandy School District.
That's interesting. I went to Garfield.
Oh, yeah. Well, good.
And just kind of going back at that time, how long would you say you lived in that area?
Well, basically lived on two different streets, but only a block apart. But lived there till I got married.
Okay. So during the time you were growing up, did you know anything about Bridgeton at that time? Did you have any involvement about Bridgeton?
Probably only when I was in my pre-driving ages, when I happened to date a girl that, or I called her my girlfriend, that lived in the area, went to school with me, and she had an uncle that lived on St. Charles Rock Road, right west of McKelvey, and we used to come out with her parents and we'd babysit their children while they played cards.
Where did they play cards?
Well, they played cards in the kitchen, and we'd sit there with the kids and play with the kids.
Keep them occupied.
Right.
Oh, I see. And what was your experience? What did you know about the Bridgeton, or was it referred to as Pattonville? More than...
To tell you the truth, I can't remember that, but I remember coming out here a lot. I never even thought about where it was. We used to come out, my uncle brought me out to Smart Field to watch the airplanes take off.
Where was Smart Field?
It was out in our city, what is our city now, and probably where the car auction area is.
Okay.
You sure that was called Smart Field at that point?
I'm not
'Cause
positive.
there was a Kratz Field out in that area.
Okay, it could have been Kratz.
There was a Smart Field in St. Charles.
Oh no, okay, it was Kratz Field, and I'm not too good about remembering names no more.
Okay.
And but I just remember the location because
Yeah.
it was right down there in our city.
Yeah.
And that, actually, I can remember coming out in this area when old St. Charles Rock Road still was the way to go, and then they built new St. Charles Rock Road out there through the bottoms and.
Okay, and you're not speaking of Old St. Charles Road at all, right? You're talking about the two pieces of the Rock Road.
What is now called Banker Lane used to be Old St. Charles Rock Road.
Right.
That's interesting.
Okay.
And it would go around through our city, and it was a much lower, and it would get flooded out a lot. That's why they built a new one.
Oh,
And I remember being out on the new one many times when that was all underwater.
wow.
And for quite a while, the two streets carried traffic in one direction only, right?
Right. Well, I can't remember that
Yeah.
since I wasn't driving age at the
Sure.
time. My uncle brought me out, and we went fishing under the Missouri River Bridge, which no longer exists.
What kind of fish would you get from the river?
Oh, not too good a fish. Usually catfish, and very seldom would you catch anything like a decent fish, but a lot of carp and catfish.
Enough for a dinner?
Yeah, we'd catch them. Yeah, we'd throw what they call throw lines out. We wouldn't necessarily fish with line and pole. They'd throw pole lines out, and I can remember my uncle throwing a line out, running a fish hook through his thumb.
Ooh.
And you'd think we'd go to the hospital.
Right.
No, we went over to the hardware store in St. Charles, and he got a wire cutter and cut the hook off and pulled it out, and we went back fishing.
No sense in stopping the fishing.
You mentioned this family that you were babysitting for while they played cards. Do you remember their last name?
Yeah, well, Dick Ahrens was the man's name, and I continued to see him many times after I got married because he went to St. Lawrence.
Yeah, well, we still see him up at the swimming pool.
Yeah, but I don't see him anymore.
Yeah.
Well, did you graduate? Where did you graduate from?
Normandy High School.
I also.
Yeah.
What year did you graduate?
1954.
before I was there. Yes. And after graduating, then what did you do?
Well, at the time of graduation, during school, from 10th grade on, I was in a class called DO. I don't know whether you're familiar with it, but that's where you only went to school half day.
Oh, okay.
And worked the other half day
Right.
because my mother was a single parent and made minimum wage at that time, which was about 75 cents an hour. And so she needed her children to help her with money. And I worked half a day, and I was, at the time of my graduation, I was working at a furniture store, which I really enjoyed. My boss there, and it was in Overland on Woodson Road.
What was the name?
Overland
Do you
Furniture,
remember?
as a matter
Oh,
of
okay,
fact.
thank you.
And my uncle, who was a painting contractor at the time, basically doing residential work, wanted me to come to work for him. And I had worked for him during the summer when I was probably about 14, 15, and I hated it. Of course, I always got all the dirty jobs. I think he was really my babysitter. But anyway, I didn't want to paint, and I wanted to stay. I enjoyed my job at the furniture store, but of course it wasn't a career type job, just delivering furniture.
Oh, I see.
And my uncle, like I said, was my father image in my life. I think he tricked me because probably a year or 6 months to a year after we were married, he told me, he was usually always over at my mother's house on a Sunday, and he told me that he knew somebody at 7-Up, and he thought he could get me a job as a helper on a 7-Up truck, and I could work myself up to being the driver, and those guys work on commission, and they make decent money, and it would be a much better career. And so I thought that sounded neat. I quitted my job. I came over after my last day at work, which was on a Saturday, and told my uncle that I was ready to start work for 7-Up, because I was a little naive back then. And he, well, I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet. Why don't you come to work for me tomorrow? I don't think there ever was a 7-Up.
Oh.
I became a painter, and my brother already worked for him in 1963. We both went in business for ourselves, and we became painting contractors.
My father was also a painter.
Oh, small
So-
world.
Now, you said you were married. When did you get married?
February 5th, 1955.
So you got married,
A year after I graduated.
and who did you marry?
Yvonne Prost, that was their maiden name, Yvonne Marie Prost. And she was a girl in the neighborhood, lived about, I guess, maybe a half a mile away from where I lived.
And did she also go to Normandy?
No, she went to Catholic schools. They were a Catholic family. And she went to Mercy High School.
Oh.
She was the smart kid. I was the dumb kid. I barely graduated. As a matter of fact, all through high school, other than my senior year, on my report card, it always said passed on condition.
What condition?
I don't know. They never told me what the condition was. I guess that I get the heck out of there. Anyway, she was either first or second in her graduating class. I can't
Wow.
remember which, but she was really up there. And
And her name is Yvonne.
Yvonne, yeah, always went by the name of Eve.
Oh, that's
But,
pretty.
yeah,
Eve.
Yvonne was her.
And she's the same age as you are?
She was a month younger.
Okay. Okay.
October 26, 1935.
So you both married approximately a year after your graduation.
Right.
And where did you live?
We bought a house over in Edmondson Terrace, which doesn't exist anymore. Motels are there, right across from the airport on Whitfield.
Okay.
And I mean, we could see, the airplanes and hear them taking off all the time.
Was this during the Lambert era? Do you recall anything about Charles Lambert?
No, this was the new airport now, the new
Lambert Field.
Lambert Field.
Yes.
And no, I don't recall
Okay.
anything. The only thing, I guess, historically is I remember, we actually, whenever one of the McDonnell Douglas planes would take off, they make a lot of noise, and there used to be a runway that actually went behind our house. It went right over Woodson Road.
Wow.
and I heard a plane taking off, and I just happened to look out, and it was on fire,
Wow.
and it ended up crashing in Kenlock,
Oh my.
and the pilot stayed with his plane, I think, to save the people on the ground. And I was down to Brown Road before the fire department even caught up with me coming from the airport. Because I seen the explosion. He was trying to get back around to land again, and he couldn't make it, and he just ended up in Kenlock, took out a couple of houses.
Oh my.
But he, fortunately, was the only fatality.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
What did you do? You were okay, you got married shortly after high school, and you married someone. Also, did Eve work?
She actually, she had a much better job. I mean, she was already working a year because she graduated a year earlier.
Where did she do?
She worked for Boatman's Bank, which was downtown, then on, I think, 5th and Olive or something, Boatman's Bank building.
She did that right after high school.
Right after high school. And she was in the, I guess, the real estate and loan department and the bookkeeping type things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she drive downtown, or did she take a bus?
Took a bus, yeah.
Was that pretty much, you think, the popular thing for women that work downtown?
I would say so at that time. Yeah, we only had one car, and I needed a car because my jobs were everywhere in the painting, no telling.
Right.
And so she took a bus down. There was many times that I would meet her after work and pick her up.
Okay.
And sometimes I think she was a bowling league from her work, and we went bowling and things like that. Excuse me.
And what brought you out to Bridgeton then?
Well, like I say, we were living in a house in I guess it was a 2-bedroom house, similar to what St. Anne's houses are, about 1,000 square feet, and I have 9 children. We didn't discuss that.
Not yet. We haven't come to the children yet.
At that point, we probably had 3 children, with probably another one on the way, and we needed a bigger house. And Carrollton was just beginning, and we liked this area. We wanted to stay in the basic area that we grew up in. And so we ended up buying a house on Primgar in Carrollton. And it was the only house at that time on Primgar other than a house right across the street from it, because Primgar dead end into a hill, because Fisher and Fitchell didn't own the rest of that property. That went down to, what's the road leading to the mills?
Yeah.
St. Charles Rock Road.
Tossic? August?
That'd be Tossic, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Gist Road and Tossic, yeah.
Yeah, Tossic is what it, yeah, it was basically the back fields of whoever farmed it at that time. And so that made it real nice.
So what was your house like on Primgar?
Well, that was it was a 3-bedroom house, and a nice.
Was it a ranch
A
style?
ranch style house.
Did it have a basement?
Yeah, we had a basement, and we built like a deck out the back, because the back of the house was up off the ground. And before we ended up moving over here, we had actually had to, because of the size of the family, we finished off half of the basement and had the boys in bunk beds downstairs, and the girls were upstairs in bedrooms upstairs.
What school did your children go to?
Well, all of the kids, as from the beginning of school, all of the girls, or all the kids, went to St. Lawrence, which was a parish school. And when we moved over here, well, we moved into Carrollton in 1960. We moved over here in 1970.
And here is...
This is Harmon Estates, and this was not in St. Lawrence's parish. This was actually would have been in what was St. Blaise's parish at the time, or St. Mary's, I can't remember which. But anyway, we wanted to keep our kids in that school, and back then the Catholic Church pretty well had definitive areas where what parish you had to supposedly attend. Well, we talked with Father Murphy, who was, as a matter of fact, to this day, he's the closest priest friendship that I've ever had. And he said, don't worry about it. You continue to send your kids here. And this is your parish. You know. And so we moved, at the time I was painting for this builder.
And this builder was?
A man by the name of Will Schusen.
Will Schusen.
And
So you worked for him?
yeah, we did the painting.
Or you worked,
in
okay.
the subdivision
I
for
see.
him. And I happened to ask him, I was looking for a place to build a house for my then 8 kids, and wanted something with more property than just a subdivision lot, because I wanted my kids to have a place to play and for them to stay home and not be roaming, you know. And I asked him if he knew of any place in Bridgeton, because we wanted to stay in Bridgeton in St. Lawrence, and he didn't know of anything, but he commented that there was a father and son that owned homes on St. Charles Rock Road, Old St. Charles Rock Road, that they originally wanted to sell him the back part of their property, and then they changed their mind, and he had finished the engineering for his streets and everything, and then they changed their mind again and wanted to sell it to him again, but it wasn't worth buying it for going through what the cost would to be re-engineered a subdivision. And so he approached them and see if they still wanted to sell it, and I was able to buy, it's a little better than an acre of ground for about $5,000 back there in 1970, which was even then a good price. And so that's my backyard.
Oh,
My backyard actually goes all the way up the street here.
oh, I see. I
And
see.
even though my house is built on a typical subdivision lot.
I see what you're saying. So did your, all your children graduate from St. Lawrence the Martyr?
Yep.
And then where did they go?
Well, all the boys went to Chaminade, which is a Catholic high school.
Where is Chaminade?
That's on Lamberg in Ladue,
Okay.
right bordering Frontenac. And all but the youngest boy graduated from Chaminade, but he was having a little trouble. He was probably took after me a little too much. And he ended up graduating from the regional Catholic school, which is no longer exists. It was up in Hazelwood. I can't think of what the name of that was.
I don't know. We can
Yeah.
come back. What about
Yeah.
the girls?
My oldest daughter went to St. Joseph's Academy, which is on Limburg, right next to Shriners Hospital.
Okay.
The number 2 daughter, I don't know, she spent some times at Sacred Heart Academy out in St. Charles, and so did her sister, but they never, that only goes to 8th grade, and I don't remember why they ended up out there. I can't remember that. But, well, my number 2 daughter, and then she ended up going to the regional Catholic school, which is also up in Hazelwood, and she graduated from there, and the youngest daughter graduated from Incarnate Word, I think, down in Normandy.
Yes,
Yeah.
I believe
Yeah.
right. I see. What kind of activities did your children do? Were they almost all centered with St. Lawrence and the activities there?
Very involved with the sports. My number 3 son was very involved with scouting. He actually became an Eagle Scout and ended up working for the Boy Scouts, and actually was sent to Switzerland to teach mountain climbing and
Wow.
rappelling
Oh my goodness.
for the Scouts when he was probably in his late teens. But most of them were involved with, like I say, the boys were involved with scouting and sports, except the youngest one never was involved with sports at all. The older ones were very involved with sports, baseball and back then soccer, not much football.
So all their activities were basically involved with the church as opposed to the Bridgeton activities.
Well, not totally. The older first 2. I mean, they played. We played on teams that played down at where the swimming pool was in Carrollton. They were like, they weren't, you know, they were Corey League teams,
Okay.
I guess you'd say,
Yeah.
or whatever organization. And then my older two boys both ended up playing in baseball up into their late teens, and some of their games were over in Maryland Heights, and
Okay.
you know, I don't know what kind of a league it was. I can't remember. That's the trouble about getting old. You don't remember those
Well,
things.
you have a lot of children to try to remember these particulars.
Right.
And did they have part-time jobs as they grew up? Do you recall? Did they?
Well, most of the boys growing up worked for me, and basically in the shop, in my paint
Where
shop.
was your paint shop?
Well, my very original paint shop was actually in my garage on Primgar when we first
Oh,
started
really?
business. Don't tell anybody about that, 'cause it probably
Okay.
was illegal. Anyway, then probably in the mid-60s, I bought a residence, what was a residence, 11566 St. Charles Rock Road, which is an old, very old concrete stucco type house.
Can you pinpoint that a little bit for us? Where it might be, like today, can you give us some?
It would be two doors east of where Highway 70 goes under St. Charles Rock Road on the south side,
Really?
right next to Shamel Automotive, or Auto and Tire.
Okay,
Right
thank
across
you.
the street from the new fire department.
Yeah, right directly across.
Okay, there's gonna be
I
a new
just took a
fire
picture of
department.
that house.
And I was told, and I don't remember who told me this, or actually some old timer from Bridgeton, that used to be a stagecoach stop.
Oh, how interesting.
But I don't know whether that's true or not. But
Do you have any pictures of your shop there? Do you remember?
I do, but I don't know where they're at.
Maybe it's
that was
some-
one I didn't locate.
Well, at some point, if you
Yeah.
ever come across it, we really would be interested in being able to have a copy.
Yeah, okay.
When did you start using the name Paintsmiths?
Well, actually, when my brother and I were working for my uncle, the painting business, as well as any construction business in the wintertime, sometimes gets very slow. And this particular year, it was extremely slow. And this was probably, this is, right after I had quit working at the furniture store. And anyway, we decided to do what you call side jobs, try to find some painting on our own. And he knew somebody over at Frostwood, which is also a Fisher and Fitchell subdivision over in Berkeley, that wanted some living room, dining room, and hall painted. And so we did that, and we seen how long it took us to do that. And I don't remember who said, whether I suggested it or he suggested it, but we decided we ought to get our kids to pass out leaflets through Frostwood and say, we'll paint your living room, dining room, hall for X dollars, or our 3 bedrooms for X dollars. And I remember we were sitting out eating lunch one day outside this job that we were doing over there, and I said, well, who are we gonna tell them we are? And just jokingly, I said, well, we could be the paintsmiths. Instead of blacksmiths, we'll be paintsmiths. And that's how paintsmiths started.
It stuck,
And-
just like the paint stuck.
Yeah.
How long did you remain in the paintsmith business?
Well, the paintsmith business still exists today.
Okay.
I have 2 different sons. That one it's not my paintsmith. Well, as a matter of fact, my paintsmith, the corporation still exists today. And the older son is Paintsmiths of St. Louis, and his business is by the old Ford plant up in Hazelwood.
And what's his name?
Jeff.
Jeff, okay.
And then my younger son, Michael, operates Paintsmiths of Missouri, and he's over off of Page, right up Page and Ashby. Yeah. And I could see early on that they were originally working for me, and when I had given my business, or some of my business, to Jeff. I didn't close my company down, but I gave basically the new construction work to Jeff, and Mike was working for him, and I could see that they weren't getting along, and I didn't want a family problem. So I suggested that they split up, and Mike went in his own business, and I then gave Michael most of my maintenance business. I held on to the maintenance business while Jeff took the new construction work and also took my employees, my estimators, with him. And so I continued operating on my own with just a couple of favorite accounts, and Michael took most of my maintenance business and started his own business. And they're both very successful today.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Do any of your children live in Bridgeton?
Michael lives 2 blocks away
Oh,
on Erman.
okay.
Yeah.
I see. And who is the son that married Joe's wife's sister?
That's my number 2 son, Larry, and he's he's one of only 2 sons that graduated from college. He basically graduated in an accounting type degree, but didn't like sitting in an office and ended up in construction, and he runs basically a residential construction business, building houses or rehab, and actually does a lot of work for the state and in what I guess you would call where they come in and redo a home because somebody's handicapped, where they need, and he does a lot of work for them.
I see.
And
Larry married Lucy Banker.
Right.
And what does Lucy do?
Lucy works for the Missouri Highway Department, MoDOT.
Well, perhaps we can interview them at a later time. Yeah. Where do they live?
They live out by Defiance, Missouri, on Highway up, right by the Boone home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, down the road from the Boone
yeah.
family farm.
Well, let me ask you, with having 9 children,
Yeah.
how many grandchildren do you have?
26 with the 27th due any day.
Oh my goodness.
And 1, 2, 3 great-grandchildren with 1 basically step great-grandchild.
Wow. And does anyone live here with you now?
No.
So you're here by yourself?
I got a lot of room.
Well, tell us about your wife, Eve, if you would. I imagine she had to quit her job at the bank with having all the children.
Well, yeah, she quit her job early on at the bank, probably after the first child was born, I think so, yeah. And, but then when I went in business for myself, she ended up being my bookkeeper, or the company bookkeeper, and naturally she worked from home when I basically operated out of the house. And then when we moved over here and I had my shop down on St. Charles Rock Road, she'd get the kids off to school and come to work whenever she could and do the books and write the checks and pay the bills and then take off early and pick the kids up from school. So she worked whatever hours that she could work it in. And she did that for a long time, and pretty well all the kids were, I guess, in high school by then. And then she started working at St. Lawrence volunteering in the library, and then ended up working one of the assistant pastors went into an inner city church and he needed a bookkeeper. She ended up volunteering down there and doing work for that church. It was called Perpetual Help, and it got struck by lightning one year, which totally burnt the building down.
Oh my! Oh wow!
So then that pastor and got transferred to another local church by Kings Highway and Highway 70. I can't remember the side street it was on, but she moved over there, still volunteering. And then the pastor, I think, of that church got moved to a job out by Kirkwood on Wood. It's not called Woodlawn, but it would be north of Manchester. And he actually hired her to come to work for him. And she worked there until she got sick and could no longer work. But it's funny that in bringing that up, I was just going through the old memorabilia and pictures, and I come across a picture of a priest in 1980 who happens to be the pastor of Holy Trinity, which is where I go to church now.
Is that right?
And he looked like a nice young man back then. But so I went over there Monday to show it to him, and the secretary said he was out of town, and the assistant pastor says, "Why don't you take a piece of tape and tape it up on his office door?"
Where is Holy Trinity?
It used to be called St. Gregory's. It's in St. Anne's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When the different Catholic church merged, they changed the name to
Right.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was kind of funny circumstances. But after she got sick, basically stayed home. I had caregivers here for her during the day, and then they pretty well took care of her.
I see. Well, we're sorry that we can't talk to her. It sounds like she was
she
very
could
busy.
she could have given you a lot more information than I could.
That's
'Cause
quite
She was
okay.
much more active in goings on at Bridgeton, especially since I was trying to run a business.
Yes, that's understandable.
Yeah.
That's understandable. Did you or your wife take part in any of the political jobs in Bridgeton? Any ward?
Never really involved with politics that I can think of. Not local politics or national politics. Really wasn't very politically minded.
Mm-hmm.
I just happened to think of something as we were talking about
That's
that
fine.
business. That you were talking about the baseball and softball.
Mm-hmm.
I know my kids were involved in not. It was probably Corey League. I don't even think St. Lawrence had softball, because if it wasn't for a Bridgeton resident that I had met, who if we were co-coaches, I guess you would call them, my younger boys' soccer or softball team, and I was having financial problems. Don't forget, I was a painter, not a business person. And after the second year in business, we were virtually bankrupt. And I just happened to be talking to this guy about my plight. And he was a CPA comptroller of a company downtown. And he met with me afterward and looked into my plight and offered to buy in for 50% of my business for $5,000, which at that time was a lot of money, you got to realize. And after probably, he then was with me every Tuesday night, every week, and went over my billing practices, and if I lost money on a job, I'd have to explain to him why, whether it was my mistake, my help, or what it was. And after 2 or 3 years, he ended up moving to Oklahoma, and I bought him out for $50,000. That's what the company was worth from the time he came to me. As a matter of fact, we were before he left, he had me investing surplus money in the stock market.
And you got a
But
good
that,
education out
from
of it.
a business education from a person I met teaching my kid how to play softball. And he lived in Bridgeton, and actually only lived 2 blocks from me, only I didn't know him. His name was Bill Fisher. And I didn't know him before that, just met
No
him.
connection with the builders of Carrollton.
No.
How did you like being in Carrollton? If your family wouldn't have expanded as much, do you think you would have stayed in Carrollton longer?
I'm sure we would, because we had so many friends there. The Grindlers, like I mentioned before, we lived right catty corner across the street. The Bowmans were directly across the street. As a matter of fact, even though him and his wife, they're divorced, his wife and her friend stopped by just last year to visit me here. she was in town and knows where I live, and she stopped by to visit. And she's remarried and lives out in the country now. Out in Moberly, I believe, or something like that. She gave me her address and everything. And her one son and her daughter still have Facebook contact with my son Jeff. And then another, I was trying to think of his name this morning, and it's gone blank. But the neighbor of Grindler's, which was a boy that was a close friend of my older boys, he actually is a dentist today, and most of all of my kids go to him for dentistry.
Oh,
So we
okay.
still have contacts with all these people that we met, and the Thorntons, which they had 9 boys, we had 9 kids. They were very close friends of mine, and you mentioned the Fehrenbachers and his wife Till before their spouses passed away. I mean, we were friends with both those families, and just so many. Bill Tenney, a longtime friend of mine, he was a carpenter contractor. I did a lot of his painting, and there were just so many people from not only from the church but just from the neighborhood that became friends.
We've interviewed several people from the Carrollton area, and I think all the comments have been very, very good and favorable.
It was like a small town. I mean, and this person I didn't even know at the time, he wanted some painting, and he lived right as you come in, Wolford Wake, you could go to the right for 1 block, and he lived right in one of those first houses there, and it turned out he owned a cabin or place down at the Lake of the Ozarks, and we ended up trading. I was able to go down there for 1 or 2 years. I did painting for him, and he'd give me the cabin for take my family down. That's the first time we were able to afford vacations was going down there to his cabin, and so that's a lot of trust, for people
Definitely.
you just meet.
Definitely.
And it was just neat.
What do
And
you
the
remember?
the old IGA store.
Are you talking at the Carrollton Shopping Center
Yeah,
now? Yeah, I was
yeah.
going to ask you about the
We
Carrollton.
used to shop in there all the time, and it was just like a little hometown store, not like the big stores of today. And I can't remember. My memory's not that great.
Well, do you remember going to Telsher Hardware?
Oh yeah, Telsher, sure. Well, Telsher. I moved my business from St. Charles Rock Road to over Natural Bridge, right against the airport, in 1970. And Telsher was still located on Natural Bridge at that time, right a couple blocks west of me, until their place burned, and then they ended up down
in
the
Old
shopping.
Bridgeton.
Huh?
Old
Yeah,
town of Bridgeton.
yeah, right.
Up by where West End Diving was,
Yeah, right.
and the
Yeah,
Bridgeton Tavern.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
right. And see, I was right east of that.
Mm-hmm.
I was right down where they practice putting the planes out. I remember they used to practice set the planes on
Oh, yeah,
fire,
uh-huh.
and then the airport fire department would phone them. Well, I was only 1 door away from where that took place.
Well, that was always exciting, I'm sure.
As a matter of fact, I had in the 70s, I had a dispute with the local painters union, and my building was torched.
Wow.
And I guess the control tower, seeing the smoke and the flames,
Yeah.
and dispatched airport fire trucks that had it out before it didn't get in the building. They had torched something on the outside of the back of the building, and they got it out before it even entered the building. The only thing I had to replace on the back was some sunblock and an overhead door.
Mm.
So, but that was kind of old Bridgeton then. I don't know whether it's still considered Bridgeton or not. Well, I guess the airport now.
There's
but,
not much of it.
Yeah.
But it's part of our
It's fine,
history, and I think for people that are just coming into Bridgeton presently, probably have no idea what happened in that area.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was the Bridgeton Tavern that Joe mentioned? What was that?
Well, I can remember it. I can only remember I wasn't a drinker back then, but I remember I used to have foreman's meeting at my office, and of course, most workers in the construction business like their beer, and so we stopped up there, and the guys had a few beers after the meeting, and one of my foreman, who's still, well, he's retired now, but his son still works for my son Mike. He must have been kind of wiggling, I guess, but he got stopped before he got to Fifi and Natural Bridge by a Bridgeton cop. And to make matters worse, this guy was a gun enthusiast.
Uh-oh.
And had what they considered, it wasn't a pistol, it had what they considered a conceal. He had like a Tommy gun.
Oh my goodness.
It wasn't an automatic weapon. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, I think it was his. He brought it to me because I had a friend that wanted such a thing, and the guy didn't want to pay the price for it, and I'd give it back to him that night. Well, he had the Tommy gun laying on the front seat. So naturally, it was just a replica of a Tommy gun. It was a single, semi-automatic legal weapon. Anyway, he ended up getting hauled off to Bridgeton jail, and I ended up having to go bail him out.
Now, where was the jail?
Well, at that time, we're at the old Bridgeton City Hall up on Natural Bridge. Now that the airport took it.
Okay.
Yep, there's
So
a
not
church
the
right.
not the old City Hall, but the
No, the
second
old City Hall was in by St. Mary's,
Yeah.
and not the City Hall, but the police department.
Yeah.
I don't remember where the City Hall was. Maybe it
Around
was there
50,
too. It was right where Telstra, right on a side street, almost across from where Telstra Hardware was, up on Natural Bridge at that time.
I see.
And that was just a little tiny. Police department was just a little tiny frame house.
Do you remember a big substantial home there that belonged to the Hydorn family?
I remember a big substantial home. I don't remember who it belonged to, but it was big. The St. Mary's had basically ended up doing some rehab. I thought that the sisters lived there or something.
Yeah, there were some.
That could have been that,
Yeah.
but there was several big homes right there on Natural Bridge by St. Mary's church and school. And
I don't remember ever seeing them, but we have some photographs of them.
yeah, I possibly might have photographs if I dig deep enough, but you should see my photographs. It takes a lot of digging.
Well, we would be interested if you find any photographs of some of the things that we've talked about, such as your home on Primgar and your, original, shop you had, and we really appreciate.
Yeah. We have about 15 minutes.
We really appreciate you just sharing your, your memories with us. As I said, a lot of people coming into Bridgeton now see Bridgeton is very different from when you were raising your children.
Well, I was thinking about that earlier. I mean, even in the area that I grew up in, it was a mixed area. I mean, you could get in mixed up with the wrong group, if you want to call it that. But in Bridgeton, and especially in Carrollton, there was virtually never no concern. I mean, it's not like today. Your kids would be out, and you'd tell them you wouldn't know where they were. You'd say you'd be home by dark. You didn't even know where they were. Well, today you don't let your child, especially a preteen, leave the house unless you know exactly where they're going to be. And it's a shame that the world is that way today. But
True.
That was one of the reasons why we wanted this property here, and it did become my backyard, which I'll show you before you leave. But my backyard became Harmon Estates playground. For all the kids ended up here, which is what we wanted. We didn't want our kids disappearing and not knowing where they were, so all their friends came here. I have a pool, an in-ground pool, and we had there's trampoline out there, and so swing sets and all the things that you would have in a park. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of became the neighborhood park, and this is where the kids all came. And it just was much more comfortable when you're raising kids, and knowing who they're hanging out with.
That's so true. Let me ask you, to veer off that. But since you do live in Harmon Estates, and we had a very big tragic event happen last spring on Good Friday when a tornado came through our area, were you involved at all in the tornado storm?
Well, you might say I was involved because my son Larry, you just mentioned earlier, had a major test that day for an operation that he was upcoming. And I didn't want him to go home out in Defiance, because with this test you could end up bleeding.
Oh.